Now we're going to look at some SUMIFs. SUMIFs are also very commonly used formulas in Excel. However, they are pretty limited in that they only allow you to sum one specified criteria. What do I mean? Let's put it in action. So, as with all formulas, you can start by typing equals into the field. You begin typing your formula code, it will come up. Now, there is SUMIF and there is SUMIFs. We're going to work through a SUMIF today, and SUMIFs are essentially a more complicated version of the SUMIF, and they allow you to match multiple criteria instead of one. So, I can either select SUMIF by opening bracket right here or by selecting it from the list. First things first, we want to say the range that we are looking for our data in. So, or our criteria, I should say. So, use a SUMIF to calculate the total value when the code matches below on the tab SUMIF data. So, if we come over to the SUMIF data, we can see that the code is column B. So therefore the range is column B. Press comma. The next part of your SUMIF is the criteria. So this is the code that we are trying to find in the code range. So if we come back to the SUMIF tasks tab, because the criteria is here, it is this code A26B that it is trying to find. And now, sorry, that's because when you heard that funny sound, it's because I clicked on something that I shouldn't have. So it put extra parts of the formula that it shouldn't have. So again, the part of the formula that is in these sort of squared off brackets, it does mean that it's optional, but I do not see any value to the SUMIF function without having a range to sum. Otherwise, it is no longer a SUMIF. So the range we want it to sum is going to be on the SUMIF data, and it's going to be the values in column C. So what is the formula saying? The formula is saying, well, if in column B here in the code column, you find the code as specified on the task page, sum the values in column C. Why didn't we use a VLOOKUP for this? The reason why is because a VLOOKUP searches through a table for a specified criteria, and once it finds it, it stops at the first row, and it will return the relevant criteria based on the column you've told it from that row only. The codes, some codes appear multiple times throughout this list. For example, A26B is here, and it probably appears many other places as well. So it's down here again. What this is going to do is it's going to take this value, it's going to add it to this value. It's going to see if it can find A26B again. Oh, look, it's here. It's going to add that value, and so on throughout the whole list. So we have now completed the formula to achieve this. So if I press enter, we get our result. Now, as with the VLOOKUP, we can copy and we can paste the formula down. Because we have left the criteria, so the criteria being the code on the task tab, because the criteria cell isn't locked, as we copy the formula down, it moves down with it. Now, just like we did with the VLOOKUP data, we could also say equals SUMIF, and then on the SUMIF data, we could just select the relevant range. However, because the range stops there and we know we're going to copy this formula down some, we need to make sure that we lock the cells. So because I'm locking the cells at the time of selecting them, when I hit the key F4, so let's do that again. So if I go to SUMIF data, I select the first range that it's looking for, and then I hit F4, it automatically locks both of the columns. It's the quickest and easiest way to do it. The reason why it didn't work like that before is because we didn't try to lock immediately after selecting the range. So I'm going to use the comma to move on to the next part. Now the next part is the criteria. So back on the SUMIF tasks. Now we've moved down, so we're on this row here. So the criteria is going to be A3. I'm going to press comma. So you want it to move on to the final part. Come back to the SUMIF data. And just like we have with the range for looking up the code, we're also going to just select the range for the value and then hitting the key F4 to lock the cells. If you find that hitting F4 doesn't work, that is not a problem. You can manually type in the $signs, but be mindful that you must type the $signs before the letter and the number to ensure that it locks both the column and the row range. And then again, you can just hit enter to actually close the formula. And again, we can copy this down. If you do not lock the ranges when you are just selecting the range alone, when you copy down, if the range moves down and one of your codes falls outside of the range, you will find that the sum is not correct, and there will be no way of knowing unless you manually check. I know this is correct because I know that we've locked the cells. Another check is to make sure that your row range is the same in both parts of the formula. So what do I mean? I mean they both start at row 1 and they both end at row 39. That way you know you're in total alignment. So, same question, same steps, equals SUMIF, and just really quickly, SUMIF column B matches cell A9, and give me the sum. You see what I did? Because I didn't press the comma correctly, when I've moved on to this tab, it's still stuck at the criteria, and that was going to cause a problem. So just be sure once you've selected the criteria or any part of the formula that you're happy with, that you press comma so that it moves you on to the next part of the formula and it does not mess up what you're trying to achieve. And then finally, we want to tell it the range to sum, which is the values, and we hit enter. Again, we can just copy and paste down. No need to lock anything because we selected the entire column. Times when you would not want to select the entire column are times where, for example, we have codes and values here for the purpose of exercise 1. Perhaps in the same column further down, we have different codes and values. And perhaps those codes match some of these codes here, but for the purpose of the exercise, we don't want to include these values. The data that we're looking at, it doesn't make sense for us to have different ranges like that, but you will find times where this is the case. As I say, as you progress with Excel and you use it more and more, you're going to find that you get much, much better at these things, and you will realize these things yourself. Most of the extra things I've learned from Excel, I've learned through use. So if you want to get better, practice makes perfect. And now the final part is using the SUMIF to calculate the total value when the code matches the below, so it's identical to what we've done so far. The only exception is that if any of the codes aren't found, instead of giving us an error, it should say code not found. So first things first, let's just type the formula in. If SUMIF, the range, which is the code, matches the criteria, which is the code on the question tab, then sum the range, which is the value. Copy that down, we can see that we get a 0 here. Now, the reason we get a 0 is because the value is not found. We don't want it to give us number 0. We want it to tell us code not found. Now, this is when we're going to incorporate an if. And so, instead of completing this task now, this task will be one that will be completed once the if statements have been learned. So you will return to this part of the workbook once you have reviewed the if statements. And so you will find the solution to this question at the end of the if statement video. That is it for SUMIFs and the most basic, or for a SUMIF formula and the most basic formula part. SUMIFs are the more complex version of the SUMIF, and it allows you to match multiple criteria. For example, you might want to bring a sum when a date and a code matches. So, for example, here, this might have been for the 1st of Jan, and this might have been for the 2nd of Jan. Therefore, you might have had, and let's find another one, A26B, here for the 1st of January. You may have only wanted it to sum where the code matched and the date of 1st of January matched, in which case you would have used the SUMIFs. But they are more complex and they require a better understanding of Excel before working. Any questions, please let me know.